So I might walk out here just to point to some of these. There's four major areas. We've got this one up here, which is off of Rocky Road, first brown spot there. This one is behind West Side Elementary. This one is kind of the Avalon neighborhood, and then this one is right on the edge of the urban growth boundary off Elliott Street. So all of these areas are already developed to high density. So all of the lots in these areas are pretty small now when it comes to repairing on a septic system. Areas that I find of particular concern are in the Avalon neighborhood. There's a lot of very small lots there and a lot of unpermitted systems we have no record of. So I usually have to go back and forth with the city, find out if this property is even served by a septic system or are they paying a sewer bill. That's usually the first question. And sometimes we've found somebody paying a sewer bill that's on a septic and somebody on a septic that's opposite. So you never know what you're going to find in that neighborhood. But I am concerned primarily about the very porous soils in that neighborhood. So it's basically pea gravel. So when the Missoula floods did their thing around here, for some reason, all the pea gravel dropped off right in that neighborhood. So it's as deep as I've ever seen it. You can dig as deep as you want to dig, and you'll never find anything but pea gravel. But we do know eventually there's a water table down there. And it's also right on the cusp of Indian Creek there. It's above Indian Creek. One of the local groups, River Keepers, did some work on Indian Creek doing testing for E. coli a few years ago and found higher levels than would be expected. And then one of the theories was that it could be coming from that neighborhood up there through those very poor soils and ending up in the creek without time to actually get treated. Many of those really small lots have seepage pits in them instead of regular drain field. So a normal septic drain field would be anywhere from 150 to 200 lineal feet of drain field that's spread out in the soil to absorb the water and the microorganisms in the soil help break down the waste. In some of those small lots, they basically just have a big pit that was dug. So it may or may not go through a tank. Hopefully it goes through a tank. Then it goes to this pit and then it just leaches straight down. So it doesn't spread the water out like we'd like to see it spread out to give the soil microorganisms time to do their thing in there. That and it's very hit and miss in there. So you might have one neighbor that has a septic and the next door neighbor is already connected to city sewer, even though they're outside the urban growth boundary. It's very hit and miss. So you never know what you're going to find in the Avalon area. The other area that's closest there is behind West Side School. There's 3 streets back there that are all on septic systems. Soil's a little bit different over here. It's a little sandier, which is good as far as treatment goes. But there's still very small lots with hard to find room for repair. So if they're not, if city sewer services are never extended to that neighborhood, we'll likely be looking at treatment systems when those fail to be able to fit something on the lot that is even close to meeting rule. And the same scenario kind of in that area up there around Rocky Road. Rocky Ridge Court is a cul-de-sac that's back in there with fairly small lots and really, really rocky soil. So there's not a lot of fine soils for the organisms to do their work. That's mostly just giant boulders. So even if you can find enough room to dig a drain field, once you dig the drain field, you don't have any soil to go back in there. So we've had that challenge in that area. And then the last area is on the opposite end down off Elliott Street. So the north or the south side of Elliott Street is outside the urban growth boundary. So anything on the south side of the street is going to be septic system. Anything on the north side of the street is within the urban growth boundary, and some of it is within the city, and some of it isn't. So down at the end, there's a little street down there called Cameo Drive down at the end of Elliott. There's some small lots back in there. And we've done a few repairs in there in the last couple of years where city sewer wasn't feasible for them, even if they could have annexed. It was still a little too far away. So those are the main neighborhoods that I have dealings with on a regular basis, mostly due to small lots. And we find things when homes are sold. So nowadays the banks are particular about lending on properties that have septic systems that aren't permitted. So if we run into a system out there that's been in the ground for 40, 50, 60 years, that's not permitted, and somebody's buying the home, the bank wants a certificate of completion on that, we have to figure out something we can do to get them that certificate on those particular properties. Yeah.
You know the age of those developments, are they all from about the same time period or?
Well, it's pretty variable. There's a lot of infill, but I would say the majority of that stuff is probably from the 50s, 60s, I would say. Eric's kind of agree. It's varied, but
So those septic systems are 70 plus years old.
right, yeah, could be.
Thank you.
And we expect a normal drain field to last about 30 years, 20 to 30 years. So if we've had something that's never come through our office, that's pretty suspect. You know, if it's been there 60 years and they've never even come in for a tank replacement permit or a new drain field or anything, we'll try to figure out what's going on in the ground out there whenever we can. And then my first step before I issue any permits in this area is to coordinate with the city public works to find out if the city sewer line is legally or physically available. So the resolution from 2016 makes it so most properties are not, the sewer line is not legally available to most lots that are outside the urban growth boundary and haven't been annexed into the city yet. I believe that's pretty much all I have. Questions?
Everyone understand the statement of the 2016 resolution. So state law says that when a property is within 300 feet of a sewer line,
It's within 300 feet and it's both physically and legally available. So it would be considered to be not physically available. Let's say if you had to go through two neighbors' yards to get to the line and they weren't willing to give you an easement, it wouldn't be legally available. Or the resolution from 2016 means that if you don't annex into the city, the sewer is not available to you. So you might have to get two or three neighbors between you and the city line to annex with you to make that happen. That is usually a difficult prospect.
Does the county have the regulatory tools to say we are not in any of these brown areas, we're just not going to approve septic fields and force them into our thing, and we'll say we're happy to annex you, and then you can connect to the sewer, and that's already our policy, right?
Well, yeah, I don't know that I have any jurisdiction to force that. We usually have to work with what we have to work with. So if the city won't allow a connection, then I'll work with the property owner to come up with some kind of a reasonable repair.
The city is happy to connect them, they just have to get annexed, right?
Right, it's the annexation that can be tricky. So if you're not already abutted to the city line, getting the neighbors between you and the city line to come with you into the city is usually the hurdle.
And we did that for the places along Belmont, those two developments on Belmont, right? I mean, that was sort of the first effort with that policy in it. Maybe it was a pain, but it worked.
That was for the new development, though.
That's true.
It's a little bit different.
Mm-hmm. Do you have a question?
Yeah, do you know how many properties would be an issue within these brown areas?
Wow, that would be really tough.
We understand why. Is it just because?
Well, because I don't have a really thorough count of who is and who isn't already connected. So I could, give you a property parcel count for those areas. We could figure that out with our GIS guys, but off the top of my head, knowing which ones are going to be problematic in the future or which ones might be problematic right now, we just don't know.
Because if we're gonna come up with the solution to address this, I think we have to understand how many properties are affected. So it sounds like the way to solve that is to have somebody else come in and,
It would be a great project for like an intern or something to take an inventory. It would be a matter of looking at what do we have in our files for permits, what do the city have in those areas for connections, and then probably do some knocking on doors on the ones that we don't know for sure and ask the property owners.
This might be for Adam. Do we have a good sense on our side in terms of what's hooked up in those areas and at all?
I think for sewer bills, we have a.
But to the point of the
Yeah.
billing may not be right.
Right, Billy might not, right, sure.
But starting with the parcel count, seems like it might get part of the way towards Gladys's question. The parcel count plus the sewer billing would
General.
hopefully get within 50%.
I have another question. You mentioned that in some areas it's rocky soil, sandy, grainy. How do we fix that?
Well, there's no fixing that. That really, the soil is what it is. So it really comes down to when we do a DEQ permitted repair, I can allow certain lengths of drain fields and certain types of soil. So sandy gravelly soil would allow a smaller drain field, say for a single family dwelling, about 150 lineal feet. Whereas the rocky Rockford stony loams that you have over there off on the Rocky Road and Rocky Ridge Court would allow, those require 300 or maybe even more than 300 lineal feet. So if you're looking at a regular city lot parcel that's say 1,000 by 2,000 feet or 1,000 by 1,000, a quarter acre or less, it becomes really difficult to come up with that lineal feet.
Thank you.
All right, yeah, if nobody else has questions, thank you for letting me speak tonight.
And thank you for that, the colors on that legend. That's very creative.
That's the GIS.
So take it down just so that the.